A very, very, very good afternoon. Welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, presented by Norman Goodfellows. And welcome to an absolutely broken host. I got into my hotel in Paris. In fact, as I look out my window, I can see the Eiffel Tower just a few kilometers to my left. I got in about half an hour ago after 3 very, very demanding days. If you've been following on social media, you'll know that it was the end of race to Rugby World Cup. Ron Rutland, good friend of mine, someone who's appeared on the Dan Nichols show a number of times, has finally completed his third and last race to Rugby World Cup. He left Tokyo at the beginning of last year, made his way down to Auckland. He then flew across to South America and has been cycling up since last year through South and Central America, across to the UK. And on Tuesday, myself, Ron, my brothers-in-law, Fotis and Fergal, and about 180 odd others got on our bikes and set off for what we thought was going to be a fairly gentle ride. Now, that's Ron at the very front. I'm somewhere at the back, quietly terrified of what lies in store. That was at Twickenham, where we also bid Ron farewell on his ride in 2019 to Tokyo. There I am with Fotis and Fergal, my brothers-in-law. Fotis had never ridden a bike before. Fergal is a semi-professional rider, so two different sides of the riding spectrum, but they both did terrifically well. And we ended up riding into Paris this afternoon. It was an extraordinary journey. Note the one person who's too tired to lift up his bicycle. I was told by my medical team I probably shouldn't be riding after snapping the Achilles last year. But thanks to Fergal and Forty and the team at Hot Chili, who were fantastic, managed to make it all the way through to Paris. And I'm now ready for Rugby World Cup. We'll be at the France game against New Zealand tomorrow. We'll also be down in Bordeaux, probably getting some wine, but also watching Ireland play Romania on Saturday, and then through to Marseille for that Springbok opener. Cue the jersey, cue the start of Rugby World Cup. It's been an amazing few days. Quite emotional when we got to the finish. Ron doing his third and last race to Rugby World Cup. I've been part of all 3 of them so far, reluctantly from a cycling point. I'm not really a cyclist, but I was very happy to be part of it as an experience and to cheer on an inspirational man who's raised so much money for Child Fund, a rugby project that operates around the world using the game of rugby, particularly with girls and young women, to challenge stereotypes, to end gender-based violence, and to support young girls and women through the sport of rugby. It's been remarkably successful, and together we're closing in on $200,000 that has been raised from this trip just over the last 3 days. So big thank you to everybody who rode. Thank you to Ron and his team and the Hot Chili team, and to the Hot Chili team captains who got me up some very steep hills over the last few days. Now, because I'm in France, you probably think, right, well, Dan's finished riding. He's definitely opened a bottle of wine. He's probably halfway through it. Well, no, I think half a glass of wine, I'd probably be asleep. And I still have a rather large gala function to host this evening with Child Fund and World Rugby. So I'm through my 83rd energy drink, electrolytes en masse. But once I'm off stage this evening, a glass of wine and possibly 1 or 2 more will definitely be in order. And then it is into the rugby. And as with Monday's show, when we had a look at some of the countries taking part in the Rugby World Cup, so today does likewise. And if everything goes according to plan, we've got a really cool producer from Devon. English wine is popping up on my radar increasingly, not just because more people are making it, but because the quality is improving dramatically in a very short space of time. And luckily, our English winemaker is also rugby mad, which helps with today's conversation. And then we head to Portugal, where we don't only have a Portuguese winemaker, we have a Portuguese winemaker who used to play for the Portuguese national rugby team. And if you haven't been following the World Cup that closely, you might not know Portugal are playing in this year's Rugby World Cup. It's a wonderful achievement for them, not just about football in Portugal. And so we have a former national player now making wine. And then I'm hoping to drag in a South African who's now in France, an old friend of Derek Kilpin's, used to be the Great Domains team, but is now part of a top wine brand here in France, to get a sense of the wine that they're making. And at the end of the show, to work out, if we were to run the World Cup on wine terms, just how well England, Portugal and France might do, all on the eve of the Rugby World Cup that kicks off tomorrow. So all that's coming in just a moment. Before we do that, as I catch my breath after 3 very long and trying and demanding days, let's have a quick look at some wine news. There is WineX that is coming up on the 25th to the 27th of October, the Santon Convention Centre. Standard Bank, as we may have mentioned last week or two, new sponsors. Mike Fridjon has done a wonderful job bringing them on board in support of South African wine. WineX is just a wonderful, wonderful celebration. There are so many wines. There are also so many winemakers who are there as well, and to be able to have everybody together and celebrating and being part of this terrific event with a new headline sponsor is fantastic. So a big thank you to Standard Bank for supporting South African wine, and a big thank you to Michael Fridjon for giving us such a terrific, terrific event. It is in my diary, and I hope it will be in yours as well. And no rest for me when I get back. I land Tuesday morning, and Tuesday evening I will be at Norman Goodfellows in Fourways in Johannesburg with the team from Glencarlo. And Glencarlo will be joining me to taste some great wine, to celebrate it, and to talk about what's been happening of late at an estate that's doing all sorts of really, really cool things. There's an art gallery running now, but also a collection of wine. They often sit a little under the radar, Glencarlo, and I'm not sure deservedly so, because they make some wonderful, wonderful wine. They're just a really cool estate, and so I will be there with the team on Tuesday evening. Do come and join us. You go to the Norman Goodfellows website. It costs £100. All of that money goes to charity, and you get a wine tasting, some canapes with it, and the wine expertise of myself, and far more importantly, the Glencarlo team. And Inzame, this is a little later on this year. They're getting into a very festive mode already. 25th of November, their night festival. And Inzame, about a year ago, it really came onto everybody's radar. And they finished so well in the Wine Mag prescient reports. So they've got now a bit of a name in South African wine, and they're backing that up with some hospitality. So if you are able to get along, I think that one is going to be a great, great deal of fun. That's the Inzame Night Festival, the Luxury Safari, as they're calling it. Head over to their website for a little more detail. All right, we've got winemakers lined up, coming in bit by bit. The first one, though, is somebody I won't start talking about wine or even rugby with, because Mike, very excited to find out that not only do we share a love of wine and a love of rugby, but we also share, if not an out-and-out love, certainly in my case, a shared experience, because a few years ago, you did exactly what I've just done, jumped on a bike and cycled all the way to Paris.
Yes, with 3 guys I played rugby with, and we gave half to breast cancer, and then the other half, our rugby club managed to have a bit of a fire, so we gave half the money to our rugby club to help with some of the repairs. And as you can see from that picture, I'm not what you deem a natural cyclist, better at downhill than uphill.
Well, that was very much me over the course of the last few days. I didn't take in too much of the scenery. I was mostly cursing Ron Rutland for getting me involved in this ride and grinding through. But some of the scenery I did take in on a very tough day of day one, Mike, was vineyards as we made our way through England. And it's not that long ago when, if you talked about English wine, it was almost with a snigger. It was, oh, the English are trying to make wine. How silly, that will never work. And a story that'll probably put a smile on your face, Mike. A little earlier this year at a wine bar in Cape Town, a blind tasting had a French sommelier as part of it. And he very quickly and very confidently pronounced that not only was a white wine a Chablis, but he could actually name the village in Burgundy that he thought it was from. And it turned out it was an English Chardonnay. He then left and nobody's seen him since. It speaks to what has been a quite remarkable rise. Is that a fair assessment? Over the last decade or so, English wine, both in terms of scale of production, but also quality, has just been increasing and improving.
Yes, there was a bit of a dalliance in the 70s with the rich man's folly, but they didn't really apply as much science as they possibly should have. And then getting to the early 2000s, folks like Nye Timber and Chapel Down were starting to get going. We planted our first vines in 2009. But since then, I think we're up to about 830 vineyards are actually planted in the UK. There's been 5 million vines going the ground in the last 3 years. So it's really, really blossoming into a fairly strong production. But more importantly, there's at least 2 or 3 French champagne houses who have bought land in the UK and planted vines in the UK.
And you fall under the group of people who've been only making some wine, but doing so with a great deal of enthusiasm and some success. Because I know a number of South Africans who've tried your wine, been very pleasantly surprised. I think the first idea goes back 12 years or thereabouts, maybe slightly longer. How did the let's think about making some wine idea come about? And then the translation of what is often a very good idea, usually late at night after a few drinks, translating that into actually getting it up and running and starting the project.
Well, as you're probably aware, in your limited time on this world, no good story starts with a cup of tea. So on a Friday night, we play Skittles, which is a West Country thing in our local pub, and we play other pubs. And of course, after a gallon of beer, most ideas seem more plausible than they should be. One guy randomly said, "Did you know the Romans grew vines on Danes Hill, which is the hill behind the village?" And the next thing you know, we got 4 of us that slung a few grand in a pot. We planted a vineyard, and none of us knew anything about wine, viticulture, or anything, and away we went. But it was a drunken idea that 5 friends latched onto and planted vines.
There we go. It sounds like the kind of project that you start off with, just have a bit of fun, let's see what happens. How much has the success of what you've done, the scale of what you've done, taken you by surprise?
Oh, it's been a fantastic journey. For me personally, on a personal level, it's been a fantastic journey. The good thing about wine people around the world, that they actually quite like listening to other wine people from around the world. And as soon as you plonk a bottle in the middle of a table, all of a sudden, both parties open up and you can share ideas. There's a few things that have gone in our favour, I have to admit. Grapes are actually really quite difficult to kill. So, if you get it wrong, you reprune and start again next year. So for the first, and the other good thing is, from when you plant a vine to actually needing a crop, you've got 3 or 4 years to visit other growers and hone your skills before it becomes really important. But from our point of view, the journey has been fantastic, both on wine knowledge and about learning about our site. And the wine industry is certainly moving away from the red trouser brigade in the UK and Tattersall shirts into certainly a younger group of people who are interested in drinking better quality wines.
And those quality wines, in your case, have a focus on bubbles. And I've had a number of bottles now of English bubbles that have been striking for not just their quality, but speaking quite distinctly of where you feel they come from. What is it about the conditions in England, the terroir, about where you are, do you think lends itself to producing the kind of quality wine that you are?
There's 2 or 3 really, really important points, and which a lot of people tend to forget, that sparkling wine is made from underripe fruit. And if there's one thing England can do just about then better than anyone else in the world, is underripe fruit. So but with that set in mind, we're not getting those big sun units. So we're getting the hang time on the vines with the grapes, so our tartaric acid falls off, but we're not getting those massive sun units where we're getting those high sugar content grapes that we don't want for sparkling wine. We want to keep the alcohol below 12%. And part of the problem in France has been these hot Julys where the sun and the grapes have run away with them. And say last year they started harvest on August the 13th because it was so hot. But then you have the problem with tartaric acid and other things as a winemaker to deal with. So we're getting a long hang time on the vine where the tartaric acid is falling away without our grapes becoming so ripe that we can't use them for sparkling. That's a personal.
Mike Ascott is from Dalewood, and he's making some brilliant sparkling. If Angela Lloyd is watching, she's one of a number of South Africans who've tried this wine. So too has the fabulous Lisa Harlow, who is an unpaid ambassador extraordinaire for South African wine. Lisa watching. Evening, Mike. Great to see you on here representing England. Well, he is indeed. We're going to find out not just about wine, but who he's backing in the Rugby World Cup. I think we can probably guess with that. As we can guess, who our other guest this evening is backing, because not only is Raphael a winemaker of some renown, but he's also got a bit of rugby pedigree. Jim, Raphael, lovely to have you on the show. Very, very warm welcome. I know my producer Ronaldo is very excited to have a fellow Portuguese on the show. Before we talk about wine, let's run through this rugby pedigree, because I believe you are effectively the Cristiano Ronaldo of rugby in Portugal.
Hello, afternoon. Good afternoon. It's a big pleasure to stay with you here. Not too much. Cristiano Ronaldo, it's Cristiano Ronaldo. We try always to work a little and show our potential in the field. And I need to tell you, I a little more at Ronaldo, I enjoy the contact, and always if I try to fight, I enjoy that, and Ronaldo can't fight a lot in the field, and always it's better to us. And for us, it's amazing. My pedigree, I begin the rugby a little late in university in the UTAD. It's the Trás-os-Montes and Alto Douro University. And it's to playing, and it's a new sport because I played handball before. But when you begin to playing rugby, it's another world, another atmosphere. You feel better. It's a team, a family, and always the contact and the little fight inside the lines. It's amazing, And I begin to be the people look to me with 18 years old, 120 kilos. I'm going to put with the strong guys in the front. You are so big. And I say, but I enjoy to run a little, I enjoy to try to show the guys, fool the guys, and make a try. And it's so difficult for us to show that. It's a big body, but it's nice, And for when you invite me to show our project and my story in the rugby, it's so nice and so beautiful to put together our 2 of the 3 passions I have in my life. And I'm want to be a Cristiano Ronaldo in a rugby player and a rugby field, but I work. We are an amateur championship, but we go to the World Championship again, second time this time, and we hope to do better image that last time in 2008. Let's go to see.
It's fantastic to have you on the show in the 2 roles of both Portuguese winemaker and Portuguese rugby player. I want to find out a bit more about the wine in just a moment. But as we're talking rugby as well, tell me a little bit more about rugby in Portugal, because it's a country we normally associate with football. You're playing in the Rugby World Cup. The tournament kicks off tomorrow. It's obviously very exciting. How big is rugby in Portugal? How excited is the Portuguese country about the fact that you guys are playing in this World Cup?
Yes, our story in rugby, it's a little young. We are an amateur country, if I can say that. Only playing it per our passion and because we love it that. And we have big and very good players. Go international championship, principal in France, because the contract is better. here we bring some South Africa players with some German, a little guys from New Zealand and Australia, but only few ones. And we have two, three, but two leagues. The third one is a little more regional, but the two first ones it's a little more strong. But yeah, always when we see a South Africa guy playing with us, we learn a lot. For example, and I remember 20, 18 years ago, we playing with Agronomia. It's a team in Lisbon, and they are the first international or stranger player. It's a South Africa guy, number 8. It's a strong guy, and we look always to them that team when we play together, and we say, "Wow, look that guy." And it's so interesting when we look to these guys more professional and learn a little. And when you see that guy playing, you learn a lot, and I think so you love it to playing together with him, because always you see the guy run and you say wow, you see the guy to eat and you say what, and next you playing and go inside with this guy, contact with this guy, he's so strong, and we say okay, we need to training more. And I think so Portugal don't look to the rugby teams before the last World Championship in 2008 when we go there, and the game with the New Zealand, the All Blacks. For us, it's very important because it's very enthusiastic, and I think so. A lot of Portuguese, and I know if you remember, but the game before, it's from All Blacks. It's All Blacks and Italy. And the Italians, and so sorry to the Italians listen has, but Italians don't respect the Aka moment. And when we go to Lyon to playing with New Zealand, and we stay in the first, we listen the national sing, and next came the Aka, and all New Zealanders look to us, between us, in the median of us in the same stadium, and look to us and do, and all Portugal, and this is true, my friend, all Portuguese guys look to them and say, we want to listen the Aka. Please don't say nothing. And the most nice thing, it's the first amateur team to go to the World Championship, and we need to say that guys do a very good job. When we're playing with New Zealand, we say, okay, we don't lose to more 3 numbers. We don't lose to more 100 points. For us, it's a big victory. And the truth is, we don't lose with more 100 points, And we do a good game. We play a lot. In that time, I stay in jury in my leg, and I don't go there. But the guys work and playing very hard. And in the end, the nice thing is when we look to the guys and, oh, can you give me some autograph? Because we're growing seeing these guys, and they look to us and say, no, we don't do autograph to the same people of us, the same guys of us. You are heavy players. We don't do autograph to you. You are the same guys. Let's go to play some soccer, and we win 14-1 to these guys. But another game. But yes, after this World Championship in France, and the most nice coincidence is we go again to the World Championship in France, and I think so. After that, the young guys begin to look more to the rugby game, and we have more young guys in the teams to do the formation and going better. I remember a game in our house here in Vila Real. We playing with our championship with Direito. It's a Lisbon team. Good players there, very good players. The national team from Portugal have 11 guys from Direito team, for you imagine. And I remember this guy came here to playing with us, and one of the guy, Miguel Portela, bring the son. Now it's the number 10, I think so, of the national team in these times in Portugal, go to France too, and the guy with 5 years old playing better than some friends in my team with 20, 25 years old, it's unbelievable that. But I think so now the Portuguese guy look to the rugby game and see what we say here. It's rugby. It's a game, a hooligans game playing by gentlemen. And normally we say the football. It's a gentleman player, a game playing with hooligans. It's what we say here. But it's so nice that.
It's a very, very good way of putting it. We're going to find out more about Rafael the winemaker in a moment. There's some great rivalries at play there. Let's head over to our third guest, though, who's a little closer to where I am now and who's kind of French, but maybe not entirely so. In fact, the accent might sound ever so slightly familiar. Morgan, a very warm welcome. Lovely to have you on the show. A very exciting time.
Thank you.
To be in France at the moment with a rather large tournament kicking off tomorrow. Let's see. Do we still have Morgan on the line? We might just have dropped him. No, we've dropped off Morgan. All right, we'll come back to Morgan in a second. Let's head back then to Mike. Mike, you're not just a great cyclist, also semi-professional rugby player by the looks of things.
Oh, that was a few years ago. I did manage. I was very, very fortunate. I played rugby for 44 years. 12 of them were at national division levels, so National 1, National 2. So I was very fortunate that all my functioning parts are still functioning. There's my older brother on the right and my nephew on the left. They're a touring side. And I've been chairman of my local club now for several years. And yes, that's when we got to the national final of we won the senior Vars, and that's me as chairman. And my wife shouted on the left. I was in tears there. But and one of the greatest British Lions to my right, I remember his surname, and John Spencer was played in a 73 tour of South Africa with he was a great British Lion. And but yes, rugby's been a fantastic servant to me. To reiterate what our Portuguese friend said is fantastic camaraderie. You can run into each other, hit each other, and the first thing you do is shake each other's hand and share a pint with each other. The rugby club of the world is one of the greatest institutions to belong to. And I think just one of the greatest spirits of the rugby family around the world is just tremendous. And been truly honoured to play rugby and truly honoured to be involved at both the grassroots and a semi-professional level. But what a club. Rugby players will stand toe-to-toe with each other around the world, sharing stories, sharing drinks, but always shaking hands at the end of the evening, which is just a joyous club to be part of, really.
And that's something where I find rugby and wine have a lot in common. Of all the many sports I've been involved with over the years, rugby players and winemakers gravitate to each other very quickly. There's almost always a very simply shared philosophy. And usually both rugby players and winemakers are quite happy to sit down and have a quiet drink or two together, which is just a wonderful element of both of those spaces. As we see the world of wine grow in England and become a more prominent one, how strong is not necessarily the quality of the wine, but the backing, the structure, the organization behind English wine? In what sort of space would you say English wine is at the moment?
Well, we're still very, very fragmented. I think there may be a little bit of grey area with some of the figures I'm going to quote. But in 2018, we produced the most bottles of wine we ever produced, which was 14.8 million bottles of wine in the UK. Now, our weekly consumption in the UK is heading towards 20 million bottles per week and over that. So we don't really have a massive footprint even in our own country. A lot of that is to do with pricing. That obviously we can't compete with the yields that South Africa, New Zealand, France get, and also the political support. You know, €5 for duty in France compared to, well, nearly £2.70, £2.75 a bottle duty in the UK. So our wine is heavily taxed, but that's not the main reason. The main reason is getting that foothold with our local consumption, that England can make wine and make wine as pleasant to drink. That's the crux. So I would say we're still quite fragmented. Wine GB are trying to gel together, but it's having the volumes to be able to compete. You know, we sell out every year, but we only make 6,500, 7,000 bottles a year, and 80% of our wine is drunk within 20 miles of our vineyard. But obviously, that's a model that not every producer can work by, because you got Chapel Down and Night Timber heading to making 1 million bottles each. So I think we need a little bit more collaboration. We need a little bit more of a structural base coming from behind that isn't one region or one area centric, or isn't just geared towards the big boys, if you know what I mean.
So terroir is one of those questions. It's not unique to England. There are lots of questions over terroir in South Africa as well. We also have questions over what we're making. What of those questions in England? You're making bubbles from a variety of different grapes. How much experimentation is there? How much of a sense of identity is there in English wine in terms of this is what we can make, this is what we think we can make, this is what we're going to make, and thus this is the offering either now or in the immediate future?
Well, that's a fantastic question, and one I'm quite honoured to be able to respond to. Of all the vines planted in the UK, which is heading towards 16, 17 million vines are in the UK, not all of them have produced a grape yet, but 80% of them are of what you lot would call the Holy Trinity of Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier. Now, we're making our sparkling from Saval Blanc and Pinot Noir. We're making a Rosé Brut out of which is Pinot dominant, and then our still wines we're using Madeleine Angevin, Solaris, which is a new variety from out of Germany, as well as Saval Blanc to give us our acidity. We personally have 56 inches of rain here on average, so we're too wet for Chardonnay, but Saval Blanc absolutely loves it. Solaris absolutely loves it. The Solaris is now being planted in Iceland. It's now being planted in Scandinavia. It was a cross from Germany, so it's a Riesling cross Muscat cross Muscadet cross. Very vigorous, but 99% disease resistance. So on a sparkling front, especially when you get into the southeast of the country, where you've got that centricity towards Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, and Chardonnay, charge on. But we have to do something else, because Chardonnay is a little bit more challenging for us to grow and ripen. So we're using other varieties that suit our climate. And I think that's the great thing about terroir around the world. You do what's best for your site. And I think growing a variety just because it's a variety is probably very, very short-sighted. And I think with the still wines, which we head towards as well, I'm a massive believer a wine should have a front and a middle and a back. And if I've got to do that by growing 3 varieties that will do that, I'm not going to get Chardonnay up to 14, 15% alcohol because we don't have the sun units. But I can use Solaris, and I can use Madeleine Angevin, and I can use Saval, and they're all going to do a different part in that bottle. Like on my front part of it is going to be Solaris. That's where the fruit forwardness comes from. The soft middle notes, the feminine notes, are coming from the Madeleine Angevin. Then that crisp acidity, minerality, flinty that I desire is coming from the Sauveur Blanc. So I'm happy to blend three varieties that I can grow in this village to make a very pleasurable white wine.
There is clearly a lot of scope and excitement in terms of what is being made in England. A couple of those grapes might have taken you by surprise a little. So that's the English picture. What about the picture in Portugal? Now, for many people, wine in Portugal means port or versions thereof. And there is, of course, world-class port and derivatives coming out of Portugal. But from my own experience, I can tell you it is well beyond that. Rafael, tell us a bit about the wine landscape in Portugal at the moment in terms of what's being made. Yes, we all know it's a country that has given us and defined the art of making port, but there's plenty more than just that. Introduce us to some of those wines and what you feel is really showcasing Portuguese wine particularly well at the moment.
Look, I need to continue and agree with you when we speak about Portugal, and if you do some international market, you see when you speak about Portugal, the people speak about port wine, and God bless us. But because port wine, it's a very important product in our story, 300 years. And if you look, and when we speak a little more about the Douro Valley, my region, you speak about a product with a lot of stories. And you can't imagine how is the pleasure to drink some port wine with 130 years, for example. And it's the heart. And I need to agree with Mike when they say I love it and have a big pleasure to making blends. It's the same of us. We stay in the region. Don't to speak of Portugal, a country, but we have 252 different grapes in our country, and in the Douro Valley principle, what we have, it's very the big challenge. It's to making the blend, what we call the field blend. It's when you look in our store and principle in our project, and if you can give me some minutes, I speak a little about my project. We are the mãos and irmãos are four. Mãos, it's the same of brother, hands in English. Irmãos, it's the same of brothers in English. And with the same of in the rugby team, we are the four brothers to give your hands and continues the dream, Here, the dream is making wines. In the team, in the rugby team, the dream is always win, yeah? But here what we have, and for you see, what we produce, our art, and I think so you can see the labels and the name. It's our hands in the label, and here we try to making the typical blend in the Douro Valley with the typical grapes. And I can speak about the Viozinho, Revigato, Gouveia, and for example, Rinto. It's four different grapes, give us a different flavors, consistency, fruit, acidity. And here we try a lot to making wines. And if we have two different worlds, it's true. We have the port world and the table wines world. And but I think so the historic and the essence stay there. It's the blending. And when we speak about Portugal, Douro Valley, we have, for example, in our case, we have vineyards with 92 years old. We have vineyards. These vineyards, we have field blends in the vineyards with 28 different varieties altogether. When we walking inside, and for example, now in harvest time, we need to decide the perfect harvest time. I think so Mike understand this very well, and you, because we go inside and let's go. We think we need to tasting 28 different varieties. And sometimes you walking inside two lines of vineyards where the compass it's 1 meter per 1 meter or 1 meter per 0.8 meters, and you tasting a red one, white wine, red one, white, red one, and you need to define the perfect harvest date. And this is the heart. This is not a science. This is what you need to feel, what you know, what you learn about your parents, grandparents, the people work with you and try to teach you a little about these grapes. Some grapes we don't know. For you imagine 5-6 years ago, we tried to catalog the name of the grapes in our vineyards. And we have 28 different varieties. And from these 28, 22 we knows what is the name of that variety. And the last 6, we don't know. And when I say we, it's me and the guy with 8 years old came here because working in the institute here and knows a lot about the stories about the grapes in the Douro Valley, and he don't know what is that grape. And we have an interrogation point there, and we have in these 6 grapes. And let's go. What is the perfect harvest date in this case? You need to share. You need to go there, tasting. And in our opinion, we try to making 70% needs to be ready to harvest. And in that point, 15%, it's what we call past now, lose the freshness, lose the acidity, lose the young fruit between the sugar, the alcohol, the complex, and another 15% still a little green, And when we speak about port, we have some grapes. For example, I show you this example, and if I can show you, we have our Mount in Rosé, Touriga National in Rosé. It's a typical Rosé with a very beautiful color. We pressing direct the Touriga National in the press and making this Rosé without skins, without they don't abstract nothing about color, And next, I want to show you, if I can, to show you the Touriga National, and in this point, you have the altitude vineyards, because for us in the Douro, we have a very heat region, very dry, very hot, and we decide between 2007 and 2011, we need to grow because we need more freshness. And the freshness, the people knows, came from the acidity. And the acidity came from the altitude. For imagine in our project, and I invite you to visit us, we have our mother house in between 80 and 200 meters of altitude, ocean level, and our winery stays 650 meters of altitude. The same grape we harvest about 2-3 weeks for you see. Okay, with the same alcohol, with the same freshness, but it's 2-3 weeks different to the harvest date. And to port, it's very important because the process of the port, it's extraction very fast in the what we call the lagars, the typical granitic tanks. And next we put the brandy, aguardente, to stop the fermentation, and you have the sweetness from the grape. It's a juice and alcohol, between some that, and you put alcohol together, the brandy, with 44% of alcohol, and you're making the port wine, But next, I don't know if you know, but we have 3 types of port wine. We have the whites, we have the rubies, and we have the tawnies. And it's a different way to making these ports. And one of the most beautiful thing in the port wine, it's you making different wines to different palates, to different people, and different foods, if I can say. For example, and I again invite you to doing that, for appetize, one of the best 2 appetize in the world, or appetize drinks in the world, it's the white port and the tonic port. It's amazing. For if I compare this in the story and now the new generation to making the table wines, and because it's more easy, because we have a lot of rules to making port wines, you need a lot of investment to age it. Imagine 10 years. If you want a tawny 10 years old, you need to wait in 10 years. If you want a 20 years old tawny, you need to wait in 20 years or more, because I age about tawny, for example, at 20 years old, not need to be a wine with 20 years. Can be a mix with a wine with 25 years and a wine with 15 years, But you need to waiting. You need to have the patience to waiting, and sure, the pocket to waiting, because it's a lot of money to do. But in the table wines, the new generation in the Douro Valley, they try to again, it's the same of the gravy field. You need to win some centimeter or some meter always, and we try to keep our space, making better, use it some mono varieties nobody enjoy, and say, oh, that grape, no, it's only to produce kilos. But let's go to study that grape. Let's go to plant that grape in a good place, good altitude, good exposition. Needs time to sun, needs irrigation, or don't need irrigation. In our opinion, here in the Douro Valley, always we think the grapes need to suffer a little, and they natural suffer with our weather, but we enjoy the grape stay or the vineyard stay a little down of the perfect line. Needed to suffer a little and stay with the hydric stress to produce better grapes, more concentrated grapes. It's a little different about the sparkling or the bubbles, maybe Mike in doing. But we lose, for example, this year. It's so hot and so dry. Last week we have 44 degrees, 45 degrees. It's a normal in the day. In the night, for imagine, we have some nights we have around 30 degrees, 28 degrees. 6 o'clock in the morning again, we wake up, come outside, and we have in 6 o'clock we have 30 degrees, 31 degrees. It's so hot and so dry. But again, we're making different wines. We need to rebuilding our vineyards and plant the grapes in the perfect place. And we need to look principal to the exposition and the altitude. And a lot of times we compare the grapes to the people. More body, more fatness. We need big leaves, big bunch, and normal. Imagine sweat more and lose more water. And you need to look to that to have the best grapes you can. But yes, I think so. We have Toriga National. We have some, if I speak about Portugal only and now Douro, we have about Toriga National, Alvarinho in the whites, in Cruzado, again in the whites, but another different wine regions. And this is the most beautiful thing. You have a very small country, we call Portugal, but with a lot of little wine regions, we produce very different wines. Inside the same region, Douro Valley, for example, you have three different wine sub-regions. And if you speak about Douro Superior, it's near the border with Spain, or Baixo Corgo, where we stay more near the green area, the Vinhos Verdes, the wines, they are completely different. You have more grapes to produce port wine in the Douro Superior, but now they need has the freshness. And here in the Baixo Corgo, our work, our mission, it's to try to produce one of the best grapes in our field, because it's so difficult, because we produce more per hectare and we need to produce less a little to have better quality, and the viticulture is very important here. And next I can show you a Toriga National in Rosé, but I can show you again a blend with Toriga National with Tinta Roriz. It's the same of Tempranillo in Spain, with Tinta Franca and Sauzão. It's a typical blend we sell a lot here, and with aged some 12 months in barrels. And it's the perfect red wine to enjoy from Douro Valley. Why? Because have the complex, have the full body, the alcohol, but bring the new generation. And that I think so. What bring the new generation? The freshness. The freshness, it's very important for us, because the freshness bring the elegance. And the people always in the market, and I don't know if you and Mike agree, but if you look to the new world, the people always want to try less alcohol, with less extraction, with less power, with less body. But guys, we have this here. We have the weather here. The Douro Valley, if you don't stay here, but you need to camp. In the summertime, it's so hot. And for us, we need to adaptate our viticulture, making better and produce less, because we don't have irrigation. The rule is we can't put irrigation in the vineyards only in the first 5 years of formation, but next it's illegal. And we need to adapt it, and this adaptation is to put the perfect grapes in the perfect place, and we are very happy what we're doing now.
Well, something you're obviously doing not just incredibly well, but very passionately, Rafael. I love the line about suffering. Margie Brand, who's watching at the moment. The grapes suffer so they can later help us not to suffer. That's a perfect line, Margie. We're almost at the end of the show, just a couple of minutes to go. We must head back to rugby to wrap it up in a second. I will, though, go to a question a little earlier. Margie did ask, to what extent has the British wine brand been developed amongst British consumers or consumers from other countries? What is the perception of the brand? Which type of consumers are attracted to British wine, and any exports of wine out of the UK? Now, Lisa Harlow did answer that to a degree, saying, Margie, I live in the UK and drink English wine. It's still in its infancy, but consumers like the local aspect and will pay a premium. Mike, if we look at that space, is there a sense of brand loyalty? Are there more and more English wine fans? And are people around the world having the chance to drink wine from England, let alone starting to follow it and buy it?
Well, I could say yes to all of those things, but they're all in varying degrees of success. From a personal point of view, the people we're getting in the vineyard is definitely getting younger. And I think there is that section of people in the early 20s and through to the early 30s who are finding wine at a far younger age than probably their predecessors. So then you've got the local aspect, then you've got the regionalities, and that's very exciting. The Scandinavians and the Germans are certainly, Dermot Sugru South Downs exports into that region quite well. And I know that Hattingly and a few others are going a bit more into the States. But our biggest problem is we don't have enough volume to be able to do massive marketing campaigns around the world. And I think there is a few brands now going on to some of the airlines as well. I know the one thing, our biggest success is also probably our biggest problem, is that we're still very small. We're making exciting wines that people want to drink or want to buy, but we just haven't got enough of them. And being, this is a slightly controversial statement, is that being in where we're in the most northern climes where we shouldn't be growing this plant, that our variations on yields between a good year and a bad year is massive. Where even in a good year in France and Portugal and these natural grape growing areas, they get a crop most years, where the variation of our sensational years to our bad years is a massive, massive gulf. But I do, just to talk a little bit back onto what Margie said, was that it's an exciting brand. It's an exciting brand with the foodies and the younger people who are looking for something a little bit different, sparky. I think we're a little bit more fruit forward than champagne sometimes. Yes, we haven't got the age and the history, but we're starting to alter how we make our wines that are certainly serving our market. Oh, one other quick thing, just to reaffirm Raphael's point: white port, lots of ice, orange peel, fantastic way to start a night.
And there's actually a Cape Vintage, which is the name we give our port styles in South Africa, with tonic available at can now. I think it's a drink we might see a bit more in the South African summer. We are over time, but just before we say goodbye, back to each of you very, very quickly. A rugby/wine question for you, Mike. If the Rugby World Cup was decided on terms of quality of wine produced as opposed to rugby results on the field, and this is probably a good one for you given England over the last few games, Mike, how well would England do at the Rugby World Cup?
In the Rugby Wine Cup, I think we'd be chuffed as nuts to be in the top 10, and if we got into the top 5, it would be a stonking result in the wine thing. I'm a big believer that possibly France would win the World Wine Cup, just with their variation of players that they have, and they'll have a few sparky wingers that we haven't got, where we're still down. We have a good front row, but we lack a little bit of style and finesse out wide. But so that's on a wine front, on a rugby front. Well, I think the big three are going to take some beating. I think if depending what happens in the first game with New Zealand and France, South Africa, the way they played against New Zealand 2 weeks ago was just brutal. And I think every side is going to get beat up a bit by South Africa.
It was certainly a fun game for us South Africans to watch. Rafael, in closing, just very quickly, we've only got 30 seconds to go. How would Portugal do in a Rugby World Cup if you were judged on wine rather than rugby?
Okay, Dan, it's a good question, and I hope always these guys go there, fight a lot, work a lot, and show the world we're growing a lot in the last years. But let's go to think about Portugal in the World Championship. If I speak about Port, yeah? If I speak about Port, if you pass the first game and if you win, you are 50 years old. If you pass the group phase, you are a single harvest from 1940. If you pass them, guy, you are one of the most crazy port wines and expensive port wines in the world, and we be create a story. We know it's so difficult to that. We have a big teams: South Africa, New Zealand, France, England, Australia. But we enjoy that, we enjoy a challenge. We enjoy to go inside the field, and I hope they feel the same we feel in 2008 when we playing with New Zealand and we listen the ACA, and in our mind always we think we want to kill you guys and let's go to the game. And I think so if you think that for an amateur team we go there to playing to do our job, but we know it's too difficult for us. We're going to game and to playing that time, and always that it's good luck to South Africa. I love that the books, and for imagine I hope heaven show to the world the substitute heaven, so to the world what is a good second line. But I think so. It's a very nice teams. We have a good, strong group. Let's go to see our chance and playing, drink, and stay here to enjoy our life.
Well, I'm not sure we're going to see England and Portugal in the final of the Rugby World Cup. It'd be fascinating if it did. But what we will do is to be sure to raise glasses.
Sorry to interrupt. Let's go to do a deal. If England and Portugal go to the final, we need to book a ticket and go together to see the game.
Absolutely. And Rafael, and if you're ever in England and you want a little tour around, give us a shout. I'm open to I will be in New Zealand, in South Africa next April. So if there's any of your viewers want to babysit me I'm bringing the wife over. We'll meet up for a glass of wine. But no, whenever you guys are this end of the world, I'm happy to open bottles and talk rugby wine.
The same to you guys, and I think so. And then to making that, you do a good job. Congratulations. I think so. The unique problem of these lives, it's 1 hour only, and we need to put more. But let's go to one of these alive in the Douro Valley in our farm here in front of the Douro River.
Well, I'll tell you what, Rafael, we're going to talk to our mutual friend Joachim and see if we can't do something with Portugal, because I'm fascinated by Portuguese wine. And Mike, we've got a number of English shows we need to do because it's such an interesting space.
Whenever you want to invite me, I'll happily to go. Rafael, let's all meet up in Portugal and we'll experience your hospitality, and then we'll return to our place as well.
You do a good job. Thank you so much.
All right, well, that's a perfect note on which to end what has been a fascinating session with both Mike and Rafael having a look at wine from both England and from Portugal. England, some difficulties on the rugby field over the last little while. Portugal, certainly not the favourites, but underdogs with the potential of causing a bit of trouble here or there. But for today, two wine lovers from countries that are making some really exciting wine, and wine I think we're going to be seeing more and more of over the coming years. So Mike, Rafael, both, thank you very, very much indeed. Maybe we'll see you in Paris for the Rugby World Cup final. We definitely look forward to the Douro Valley and to being out in the West Country. And to both of you, keep making terrific wine. And thank you so much for being part of Dan Really Likes Wine. And that wraps us up for today. I've got a child fund rugby function to go and host for this evening as we end our 3 days of the race to Rugby World Cup, 3 days of cycling, which we've been doing Tuesday, yesterday, and today. 322 kilometers we covered from London to Paris. I'm exhausted. I need a glass of wine, and hopefully I'll find two, one of them Portuguese and one of them English, and go on from then. Join me on the show on Monday. Two very special guests. Brewer Raat celebrates his title, a winemaker of the year, as crowned by Tim Atkin in his latest report released earlier on this week. And the only 100-point wine in the lineup that was made by Renan Borman, the Epilogue Syrah 2021. We'll be chatting to Renan about how he got his wine absolutely perfect. That does it for now. Thank you very much for joining us from Paris. Goodbye. We'll see you on Monday. And whichever rugby team you're supporting, good luck, cheer them on, and do so with a glass of wine in hand. Goodbye.
This is Q-Bar Rosebank in Johannesburg. And this is Q-Bar in the heart of Stellenbosch. And one of these two will be the venue for you and a friend for an unforgettable evening if you win this month's competition with Norman Goodfellows. You'll be treated to welcome bubbles and incredible wine tasting with the world-class sommeliers at both Q-Bars. And you'll also have either a cheese platter in Stellenbosch or a sushi platter in Johannesburg, and membership of the exclusive Coin Rock Members Club. And all you have to do to win this incredible prize during the month of September, buy any bottle of either Coin Rock or Norhook wines, with Q-Bar being the home to both, and you'll go into the draw for that fabulous prize and a Q-Bar experience you'll never forget.